Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi bringing you guys another Market Watch episode as promised. It feels like we're seeing buyouts of a new card every single day, with different cards spiking in price for different reasons. Some of them have to do with people grabbing cards that are relevant in the online meta that we're seeing right now, and in other cases it's because people are speculating about the potential usefulness of a card later on down the road. Either way, I know that it can be a bit difficult to keep track of everything, which is why I'm here to bring you guys all of the most notable jumps in card prices so that you all can be as informed as possible. Now, before we get started, I do want to show off this absolutely beautiful mat that is being produced by Team Dank Deals. Now, this video isn't sponsored by them or anything like that, but the reason I bring this up is because the artwork for these mats was designed by Tombox himself. He also worked on the Minerva mats that Dank Deals has sold before, so if you've seen those around, you know that they're really amazing, high quality cloth mats. Also, I personally know Hector and he's a really cool guy, so please do make sure that you guys check out the mat and the matching sleeves. I'll leave a link in the description down below. Okay, so to kick things off, let's talk about Magician's Souls. So Magician's Souls is a card that was dropping in price really steadily after we saw Spiral Master Plan banned. It was at like $120 to $130, then it dropped to around $100, and we actually saw it hit a low of around $80 to $85 when it looked like the card wasn't really going to be meta relevant anymore. This is especially true after we saw Lunalight Tiger banned, because that was like the other deck that was potentially using the card. Now, however, we are seeing Magician's Souls jumping back up in price again, all the way up to the $115 price point. Now, part of this is because of the play that this card is seeing in Eldritch, as you can use it to send your spells and traps to the graveyard, then banish those cards from your graveyard in order to search, so it does provide a lot of free value in that regard. I believe it's also now played in Pendulums as a way to get Endymion into the graveyard, and I believe it's a big reason that Ultimate Rare Spellbook of Secrets is so expensive, because people are teching in cards like Spellbook of Secrets and Spellbook of Knowledge to turn Magician's Souls into yet another draw 2, so it's like allowing you to draw 4 cards, which is pretty crazy. Now, because the card is so new, I'm not expecting to really see any huge drops in price just because of the reputation it has. Like, I don't think it's gonna hit below, say, the $90 mark unless we see some sort of reprint. I'm expecting it to fluctuate between the $90 to $120 mark for the next year or two, depending on whether or not the card might have any potential in any given format. The next card that we have is Superdreadnought Railcannon Juggernaut Lieb, another card that has been gradually climbing in price over the last couple of months. On one hand, trains are seeing quite a bit of hype under the new Master Rule as an interesting OTK deck, and we've seen cards like Urgent Schedule and Super Express Bullet Train bought out as a result. However, it is also important because the Eldritch deck plays it, as they can make it by overlaying 2 copies of Eldritch into Gustav Max, burning your opponent for 2000 damage, and then putting this card over top of it. Now, this isn't something that you're going to make very often in Eldritch. I believe you don't actually go into your extra deck very much at all, but it is one of the best extra deck options available to the deck, so you should have this card readily available. However, it was only ever printed once, in Legendary Duelist Sisters of the Rose, which wasn't a very popular set, so there are relatively few quantities available on the market, and we're seeing the price of this card increase rather quickly. Now, I'm not expecting this card to be reprinted for about another year, so if you do need it, it's not the worst card you could hold on to, unless Konami decides to surprise us by reprinting it extremely early. So speaking of extra deck options for the Eldritch deck, the next card we're going to take a look at here is Skypalace Gangaridai. So this is a relatively old secret rare from way back in Number Hunters, and it is a generic rank 10 option for the Eldritch deck, very similar to Gustav Max and Lieb. I think that this is definitely a less impressive option because it does only burn your opponent for 1000 damage, but it does also allow you to destroy an opponent's card in the process, which I guess is kind of cool. However, do remember that it can't attack in the turn in which you activate that effect. I definitely think that this is a card that you should really be staying away from. I don't think it's that important. Even if you are looking at playing Eldritch, I think that because it's an old card and a lot of people kind of disregarded it as bulk, people saw it as something that they could try to easily spike up in price because the card was so overlooked, so cheap with limited quantities available. If you have a chance, I would definitely try and dig this card out of your hollow bulk to move them for whatever value you can get. Next up, Ultimate Rare Cosmic Cyclone saw a buyout as there are no quantities available on TCG Player at the time that I'm filming this, though there might be some posted overnight or in the morning. There are a few on eBay between the $50 to $60 price point though. I think that this card is slowly becoming the back row removal of choice for a lot of players this format, because not only is it an out to Mystic Mine, it also banishes Eldritch cards, as you can't later banish them from your graveyard in order to get those searches. Now, as an ultimate rare, there were relatively few copies available, so it was probably pretty quick to buy out. I am expecting them to be listed back up on TCG Player at a price that's consistent with eBay, so between the $50 to $60 range within the next week or so. Although I am expecting tomorrow for some people to be listing them at as high as $80 to $90 as the card just gradually reintroduces itself back into the market. If you do want to play this card, there are a lot of cheaper versions available. There are several common copies as well as the Dude Ultra Rares, and then there also are a couple of secret rare prints. I personally am a really big fan of the secret rares, so if you are able to move the ultimate rares at an inflated price, I think that the secret rares are a great alternative for you to pick up and play. So next up is a card that we probably talked about quite a while ago. It's kind of one of these cards that randomly gets hyped up at different points because people think it's a potential card for the meta, but it never really pans out. I don't think I've actually ever seen this card in a YCS or regional topping deck, but Psychic Shockwave allows you to summon a level 6 machine dark monster from your deck by discarding a spell or trap card when your opponent activates a trap. So really specific condition, right? But the idea is that you're summoning Jinzo to negate your opponent's trap cards in response to their trap, which I guess is cute with Eldritch running around, but to be honest, I don't really see this card being viable at all. There is also the fact that we are getting a ton of new Jinzo support in the next Duelist pack, which is probably a factor as well. Now, because Psychic Shockwave only has one old secret rare printing, I'd be really surprised if they didn't reprint it in that Legendary Duelist set as well, which would, of course, cause the price of the secret rare to tank from the $24 that it is currently sitting at. So I'm going to suggest dropping this card for whatever amount of money you can before it's too late. So we've already talked about 2 Legendary Duelist cards today, and now we're going to talk about a third. We have Photon Orbital that was just bought out yesterday, I believe, and is now all the way up at $70 a piece. Now this card has gotten hyped up at various points in the past, and I believe that some people still think that Photons are going to be a strong deck under the new Master Rule, though I personally would have to disagree with you there. However, this is a card that might be splashed into different light decks with the release of Union Driver in Eternity Code and Union Carrier in Dual Overload. It is worth considering Photon Orbital, I think, in different light decks, as you can equip it directly from your deck and then search out Galaxy Soldier when it's sent to the graveyard for easier access to Cyber Dragon Infinity. I know that this is something that ABC was doing before, but I don't know if we're going to be able to do it in any meta deck now. Either way, I do think that paying $70 each for a copy of this card is a bit steep when we don't have a solid meta deck that we know can use it. It being a fairly old Legendary Duelist card, we do have to actually worry about it being in an upcoming reprint set, though when that's going to be is anybody's guess. With the new support that we got in Eternity Code, Plunder Patrols are looking like an actual deck now. I don't know if they're going to be top tier or anything like that, but between the new main deck monsters and really solid spell cards, as well as Lease being an amazing extra deck monster, people are excited about seeing what the deck can do at the competitive level. Now because of that, Whitebeard and Redbeard, the 2 ultra rares from Ignition Assault, have actually jumped up in price, where Whitebeard is now around $15 and Redbeard is around $10. So these cards were actually at around $5 to $7 for quite a while as people waited to see what the new support would be, so hopefully you guys managed to snag them at that price. Now we don't currently know if we're going to be getting any additional Plunder Patrol support in the next couple of sets, since Rise of the Duelist was kind of vague about whether or not we're going to be getting any more TCG exclusive cards, but depending on what happens, these cards could shoot up to the $20 to $25 price point, or they could tank back down to where they were before. Either way, I think they are worth holding on to, as they're not due to be reprinted until 2021 at the earliest. Lots of time to see whether or not the archetype does pan out. One thing I do really quickly want to note here is that the 2 Plunder Patrol ships, Mork and Bran, which were secret rares in Ignition Assault in the same set, as Whitebeard and Redbeard haven't actually fluctuated in price too much, as they're still around the $5 price point. This is because Whitebeard and Redbeard were actually quite short printed. It was harder to pull them relative to the ultra rares, whereas Mork and Bran were pulled at very high rates relative to the other secret rares. That being said, I do still think that Mork and Bran are worth picking up at that $5 price point, and they do have the potential to jump up to $10, $15, maybe $20, depending on how the Plunder Patrol ship deck really does. Next up, I figured I couldn't go through another Market Watch episode without discussing this card in some capacity, so Infinitrack Anchor Drill is on the rise yet again. I actually believe yesterday we saw this card at $100 lowest on TCG Player, but now it has since settled back down to a somewhat reasonable $45, which is still up from the $20 to $30 that we're more used to seeing for this card. Now, with the new Machina structure deck coming out a couple of weeks ago, as well as the hype that we're seeing for the train deck, it's no wonder that this card has jumped up in price. It is also apparently seeing some play in Cyber Dragons, as it can be used to give the deck access to True King of all Calamities, which is really interesting. Now, as much as this card does have a number of different decks that it could be used in the upcoming meta, I don't think any of those are going to be top tier. I am also thinking that this card is going to be reprinted in the upcoming 2020 Megatins, because I'm suspecting that we're going to be seeing a lot of different side sets like Infinity Chasers included in there, very similar to what we saw with Dark Savior reprints in the 2019 Megatins. For that reason, I'm actually going to recommend selling Anchor Drill if you can, though if you think that it's going to dodge being reprinted for the foreseeable future, then I can understand why you would want to hold on to it. Now, this one is kind of interesting. We're actually seeing the price of Pot of Desires increasing all across the board for all different rarities. This is kind of surprising to me because I believe that Eldritch and Adamancipators both don't actually run Pot of Desires as far as I've seen. However, it is kind of like a more generic staple card, so I guess it does make sense that people would want to have access to their copies of this card. So for the higher rarities, we are seeing some pretty crazy price points at the moment. Ultimate rares are up at $94. I believe that I recommended for people to pick these up when they were down at around $60 each. They then jumped up to 80s pretty quickly, and now they're still trending upwards from here. I personally think that Ulti Desires is going to be around $120 to $150, especially if a card like Ulti Duality can be as expensive as it is, when Duality isn't nearly as meta relevant as Desires, though personally I'd be a bit hesitant paying $90 or more for them at the moment. Secret rares are actually also all the way up at $26, which is up from the $15 to $20 price point that they were at for quite a while. And then even with the lower rarities, right, Ultras are up to $5 to $6, and Commons are still at $4. Now, it is worth noting that Pot of Desires does have a common print due in the Sacred Beast structure deck. It was printed in there in the OCG, so I am expecting that to be carried over here. That being said, I would look at making the investment and picking up higher rarities of a staple card like this and moving the commons and ultras, because after the reprint, the higher rarities will retain value while the lower rarities will likely tank. The last card that I want to talk about here is, strangely enough, Thunder Dragon Colossus. I haven't talked about this card in like a really long time, so I don't know why, but Ulti Colossus are trending upwards in price. Right when they got banned, they fell to about $20 each. They went up to $30 pretty quickly, and now they are sitting at a whole $40. I don't quite understand why this is, because in my opinion, Thunder Dragon Colossus is a card that can never be unbanned. It's a boss monster that is far too easy to access and can shut down your opponent entirely in the right situation. I understand that there are ways to play around it, and I understand that the card is currently limited in the OCG and it isn't overpowering there, but I just don't see it happening. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if it got banned over there in the OCG as well, especially if they hit a very search-oriented meta. The card isn't nearly as iconic as something like Max C, so honestly it just doesn't make sense to me why it's trending upwards in price. If you really want to hold on to this card just in case it gets unbanned, go ahead and grab some secrets or ultras, but at this price, it's definitely difficult for me to justify holding on to the ultimate rares, so I personally would be moving them. Alright guys, that is it for today. today's episode. Now, I did still have a couple of other things to go over, but to keep this video from getting too long, we're gonna wait and see what happens to some of those cards over the weekend, maybe over the next week. Cards like Melier of the Trees and number 38. In the meantime, there is a lot of cards that we talked about today that are very important for you guys to take note of and try to move your copies of soon, because I feel like they are going to tank back down in price relatively easily. Anyways, everyone, if you did enjoy the video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me. It does help a ton. I have also left a link to the new Dank Deals mat in the description box below. Please go check them out. They're really, really awesome. And also, guys, leave a comment down below in the comment section. Let me know what you guys think of the market and what's happening right now with all of these buyouts. And let me know if there's anything I missed so that hopefully I can cover it in a future Market Watch episode. And of course, if you haven't already, what are you guys waiting for? Make sure that you are subscribed to Tombox and myself for all of the latest and greatest Yu-Gi-Oh content. Yeah, so until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.